So the purpose of this video is just to help prep you into writing inequalities from applications. So you see that up at the top, that this is the application piece of our solving inequalities, because I can give you an inequality at this point and you can solve it. But the real question is, can you look at a real world scenario and create an inequality to go with it? So I wanted to go over a couple just common inequality phrases that tell us which symbol to use, but that can kind of be confusing. So you see a little chart in your notes, and we're going to talk about what some of these mean, because I'm sure you've used them or heard them or have some experience with them, but we're going to talk about what inequality symbol we should use when we come across them. So the first example of an inequality phrase that we see often is at least. Now when you hear that, you see that word least, and so I don't know about you, but maybe your brain goes to the less than symbol. But if you start and really try and think about it, if I tell you that I have at least $20, that doesn't mean that I have less than $20. What it really means is at the least or the minimum amount. So I'm going to even put it that way. At least means the minimum, which really means I have more than that amount. So if I have at least $20, that means I could have $20, but that's the minimum amount I could have. So what that really means is that when we see that, even though the word least is in it, it's really talking about the greater than or equal to symbol every single time. And you could say that with chores. Maybe your parents say, at the least you need to clean your room. So what they're saying is you have to clean your room. That's the minimum you need to accomplish. But maybe you could do the dishes or do more than that as well. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, we see a statement like at most in the second box here. And again, you hear the word most and think maybe the more than symbol. But if I say that I have at most $50, that does not mean that I have more than $50. That's the maximum amount. So if I have at most $50, that really means I probably have something less than $50. So in this scenario, we're going to have that or equal to piece again, because again, at most I could have $50. I could have that in my pocket, but this is the less than symbol, less than or equal to statement. So likewise, if we see a statement such as no more than, that is similar to at least. It means that I do not have more than a certain amount. So this one kind of piggybacks on with the at most statement, that the maximum amount that I have is whatever I say. I have no more than $50, which means again that I could have less than $50 or I could have equal to $50, but I do not have more than that. So it's like anti less than symbol. Anti more than symbol. It's less than in the grand scheme of things, even though it says more than. So again, some of these just require us to think backwards, but if you really stop and think about it, I think that you'll be able to kind of reason through it. And again, the last one, no less than, means that the minimum amount that I have, or the smallest, the least amount, however you want to word that, is $20. I have no less than that. So that means that I have to have greater than or equal to that amount. So really, if we can kind of work through these symbols, it's going to greatly help us as we start looking at word problems and solving. So just to refresh some key tips that we use, if you just look down below this chart, you're going to see these strategies that we used when we were writing equations. And it seemed to work really well for us that you would first define the variable. What is it that you're looking for? Because that often is paired up with the variable. Determine the total. But in this case, it's not going to be something equal to. So in our equation writing process, every time you saw something was a total, you wrote equal to something. But in this case, you're really looking for these key phrases, what's greater than or less than, and you will put that symbol first and then your number on the other side. In some of these examples that you're going to run into, they might be one-step inequalities. So these two questions, is there a constant and is there a rate, maybe only one of them applies, and that's okay. You don't have to have both pieces if it's a one-step inequality, but just recall that those rates required are repeating items. And then I think the most important part in this is that when we write these inequalities, there should not be any equal signs. None of these scenarios are equivalent. They all have an inequality phrase. So my advice would be to highlight those word phrases that you see that help us identify what symbol to use. And so they could be one of these four from the chart, but maybe it's even more obvious than that, or maybe you have to search a little more for it. So I'm not going to write the inequalities with you, but looking at those first two examples, I'm just going to read through them and see if we can identify the inequality phrase together. So you earn $8.25 per hour at your after-school babysitting job. You already have $40 saved, but you need to save, check it out here, at least $535. So again, when we talked about at least, that really means the minimum amount needs to be $535. So I really want more than or exactly $535. So that's where I would start in this process, and then you're going to fill in this side with maybe a constant or your rate as need be. But this is our starting point in our inequalities. And again, if you identify what the question is asking, you're trying to find the number of hours that you need to babysit. So that could be a clue as to where to put your variable. And that second example, in the 7th grade class has been competing in the box top collection competition. The first week we collected 75 box tops. The second week there were 132 new box tops collected. If we must collect a minimum, there's your inequality phrase, of 400 box tops each month, how many total should we collect in the next 2 weeks to meet the requirement? So when we see that at the minimum, that means that we actually want more than $400 box tops, I'm sorry. So we would be okay to have exactly 400, and that's why we have that or equal to piece, but really we want more than that because we want to win. So we want something to be more than or equal to 400. Just one thing to note on this problem, even though it says the word each month, you're only talking about 1 month because it says just to finish off this month. So that's not a rate like you might think. So hopefully those tips helped you. There's a couple more examples on the back of this to work through, but really I want to see you write these inequalities like we were writing our equations and then solve them, keeping and paying attention to undoing addition and subtraction, and then your multiplication or division piece. When you're finished, you can move on into the next directions.